All right, hearing none, I'll declare the vote on it closed. Yeah. Should be early. Drop down. County administrators.
Okay. The first item is a contract with Robinson Farmer and Cox. At the last meeting, you approved that I talked to them about a cost for services for the next 3 years. And they came back to us with what their audit fee would be for fiscal year 21, 22, and 23. Just for your information, I put what the fee had been for 18, 19, and 20, so you can compare it and see that their fee seems reasonable and compared to what it has been. Not to mention that the audit requirements on them to do has been increasing, not because of anything we've done, but just because GASB is requiring them to do more, and because of things like the COVID, they're having more things they have to audit. So I wanted to see if you will approve or authorize me to enter into a contract with them for the next 3 years.
So in 6 years, they're going up $10,000.
Well, it's about $2,000 a year.
So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, they've got $2 million more to audit potentially this year.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's that,
Absolutely.
that's-
Absolutely.
Just on them.
Just that.
Yeah.
Ready for a motion? I move that we approve the contract and authorize the active administrator to sign all documents.
Second.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? Ms. Brown?
Ms. Cliftonburg?
Yes.
Mr. Yoder?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Booth?
Yes.
Mr. Terman?
Yes.
Motion passes.
You did his start.
All right. Can you all hear me? Yeah. So, yeah, I'm Brett Cavallard, Chairman of the Electoral Board, for those that don't know. You know, we had a great year this year for our election turnout. It was a terrible year for COVID, but when it came to an election turnout, it was great. Our citizens were really happy about the early voting, the early in-person voting behind the courthouse. It went really well. And I think as you speak to your constituents, they'll see that they'll probably thank you that you all were very supportive of that. And we want to thank you for being supportive of what you did to help that happen. It was an ordeal to have that much staffing so early, 45 days before Election Day. It's required by the state, right? But we got it done, and very much thanks for what you all did. We really appreciate your financial support for that. We had a special appropriation from the CARES money, and then you all supplemented that quite a bit. So that was great. We really appreciate that. That said, I wanted to mention that we have a lot of challenges. Amy can go into more of the detail about the schedules, but we have an election coming up in June that we had not planned for. And so it's a primary that's coming up that we are required to conduct. We have to conduct the early voting. We're not going to do it quite as strenuously as we did for the presidential election, but we still have to staff it for 45 days. We think it'll be a lighter staffing, but we still have to do it. And so what I wanted to do is to go through the shortfalls in our in our budget. I think you have them there in your packets. And so I'm prepared to ask any questions that you may have, but the bottom line comes down to just under $14,000 that we need to ask you all to help us with a budget supplement in order to get us through the end of the year. That's the electoral board to get us through the end of the year. I'll pause there and see if you all have any questions.
This is different from the email I received.
I'll give you a new one
Yep.
today. It's the 11,000 and then I emailed, I put on your desk.
Yeah.
13.
There's a new one.
I apologize, I pulled out of the wrong column when I did my figures for one of those line items.
There it is.
Yeah,
That line item had to do with, that line item had to do with an overage on printing,
The balloting ballots.
printing ballots.
Printing ballots.
Hey, I was trying.
Sure, we can use this one?
so what we're kind of looking at is, we do anticipate having to set up for COVID precautions at the June 8th primary. And so we're looking at about 10 folks at each polling place, 4 in the absentee, and setting up the tents and doing everything just like we did for November. We do expect a lighter turnout, but probably still a good, decent turnout.
It looks, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to-
Go ahead.
It looks like maybe only one party. And
It's not official, but what we're hearing, the Democrats will have a primary and the Republicans will have a convention.
Yeah.
Just the papers haven't been, filed yet.
Republicans are still fighting over how that happens. I watched a few of those 4-hour conversations.
Yeah. But, and we will try to, do all the early voting, upstairs in the office unless someone is disabled and we'll go out to the car. We may have to have someone out there with a ballot box again. We don't know the rules until, closer to time, yeah.
And I guess the General Assembly could change the rules during
Yes,
session right now, so.
that's right,
Okay.
yeah. But
I wonder if there's any chance we could use some of the CARES money for the additional staff. Is that what money we have left?
60.
60, we are still using some for our COVID cleaning of the offices and some,
Right.
the teleworking stuff, but I think we could justify some of this as being due to, social distancing.
Probably not all of it,
Not
but
all
maybe
of it, we do
some of the
all
additional
it.
staff, maybe.
Right.
There might be a couple $1,000.
Yeah, so that's definitely worthy of looking at.
If,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and whatever we do, I guess, if they change this primary, which is potentially possible, then we could just do a carryover into the next budget. Right?
If you were to, for example, authorize 14,000 and they ended up not needing it, then you could do a carryover. into the
Right,
next
if they
year.
move it to July, August, or whatever.
At first we were told to plan for a June primary and an August primary. We still don't know if that's gonna happen or not, and a lot of that goes back to census data, redistricting, because it's the House of Delegates seat. And, that's the holdup, but for June 8th, it will be the, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general.
What about local races? I mean,
That's what-
I'm not gonna jump in on y'all's view, but that could.
I think she's already been asked that question.
Okay, well,
Yeah, and let me tell
But she
you
can
that
tell everybody.
the plot thickens. I'm doing a little investigating on, what happens because the new redistricting commission is, mentioned, perhaps instead of having a, August primary, they may extend it and have a special election in March for the district races, like House of Delegates. So then, just a moment ago, I found out that for local races, that's probably not possible, and I was told, I need to talk to my county administrator and our local attorney, because I don't think there's a provision, in the law to move the local race without General Assembly action. So I don't know what all we're gonna be looking at, but I'm gonna get on that first thing, tomorrow and see, because, we have courthouse in Indian Valley, supervisor and school board.
Right.
that are defined by district lines.
Right, 4.
Yeah, and then,
We're supposed to do redistricting, but we don't have the data to do that.
But the data is so far behind, is that correct?
I don't see how the data's gonna get there, but I don't know.
Before a November election, is that what you mean?
Well, before the potential,
See,
Right.
the filing deadline
Right,
for
nominations,
November
right.
is June the 8th. So how can you go out and take signatures if you think your district might change? That's
or even
kind
if
of,
you don't know if you're gonna elect this.
Was it, that was my question. If you go, if you go out and get signatures in your district, then, you know, you have to have 125. Well, if 80 of them's moved into another district, does that disqualify the candidate?
And it's also not fair for, what if the district moves and someone is suddenly in a new district and they wanna run? Like, you know, someone that lives in,
right.
currently in Little River and someone is in courthouse and they say, well, it wasn't fair because now I can't run because the deadline's
This
passed.
brings up many issues, so, I have a lot of phone calls to make tomorrow, and I'll probably be.
I apologize for
See,
bringing that up.
I don't understand, where does this new election committee get the authority to extend
The delegates
the House of Delegates?
to March.
Yeah, they're basically leaving them in office until March, or is everything empty till March?
We could just go down to 3 supervisors till March.
No, I'm talking about on the House of Well, that's all right, you can do that too. I'm talking about the House of Delegates.
Extended vacation.
Where does this committee that's been put together get the authority to change House of Delegates race?
But if they do that to the House of Delegates, you'd almost think that you would, I mean, there are
Extend it
local
to
races
your
all over the state. So therefore, if it's good for the goose, then it should be good. I don't know.
It-
It's bizarre.
And if you gotta go around and get signatures, you're in a COVID situation, you're going from house to house to house.
Because we know that by May, we're not gonna have enough vaccines. So that's a situation we're not gonna be over.
No.
More handouts?
May I have your handouts, please?
I guess, maybe that, you know, I was thinking, we could potentially have
List of who's in your district,
a,
and here's a list of the upcoming elections.
you know, on the local races, there could be local parties there for a primary. Is that possible, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there might be a potential that we would have
For you?
a separate local primary, a separate House of Delegates primary, and then this
If
primary.
a local party asks for a primary, it's gotta be on state primary day.
Okay.
Um,
But we don't know when that would, they
If
could
your
potentially
lines are-
piggyback onto the House of Delegates maybe,
maybe,
if they change it.
it just gets more and more involved, and, I have a really good article, and I'll share it with everyone by email, but, it says that Virginia and New Jersey, I believe, are the only 2 states that have races based on districts in the census year. Well, that's been going on for decades, so
Yeah,
it
why?
looks like it could be addressed and not put us in this bind, because we've never been this tight. But
Right.
we've cut it, you know, it's been rough on us on the fast track, so,
Right, because the statewide races, it doesn't matter, but
that's
the
right.
district races, it would.
Like, we also have mayor and 2 town council, and that doesn't.
That doesn't.
Because that's a
Affect.
whole,
Mhm.
you
So
know,
that
large.
was-
That just says we have the most military.
Yes, so, I'll bring this up.
I guess the board of supervisors could change the actual
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, all
the dates that,
Maybe,
that'd be something interesting to ask, because we could actually maybe solve that problem.
What's that?
Could we solve that problem 10 years from now by changing the dates that we get elected,
Yeah,
our term length?
we could. That would
that
solve
wouldn't
it.
address the,
The current problem, I'm just
delegates,
thinking-
but it would, yeah.
Thinking down the road.
Mhm.
The years that we are elected, like in the past, it used to be all 5 of us got elected at the
Right.
same time. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could change it to where we wouldn't fall on that 10.
If you look at that schedule of elections, it will tell you how many localities have local races. One.
If I'm not mistaken, I think The reason we ended up 3 and 2 was when.
60 localities.
When they did the elected school boards.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that in part of the wording of the code and everything, that if you went to the elected school board, then you had to break it up.
Oh, I'm not suggesting not
But I mean,
breaking
you
it up.
had
I'm
to have
wondering
like
about,
3 and 2.
I'm wondering, you know, the census falls on uneven years.
Right.
I'm just wondering if there's a possibility that we could have our elections on even years. That would solve that problem.
Still keep it 3 and 2, but not have it be 21.
Probably take it back to the assembly though.
Maybe, I don't know, I just thought.
Probably. They won't let us do it.
So,
They don't give us a certificate tax. How many years was we asking for that?
and I will be soon asking to meet with you, Cindy, and we'll see.
Hash it out.
Yeah, we'll see what options are available for local governments to do.
But 60 out of 99 get elected this year. I mean, we're not the only ones, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Well, if they come up with a way between that, we could do a 1 year.
That leaves
Well, you could
39
do a 3-year.
counties that are,
Next
and
time we
60
run
that
a
are. That's
3-year,
over,
then it
you
would
know,
be on
that's 2/3 of the state that have
5 years instead of,
supervisor elections.
it would take care of the problem
Right.
going
I
forward.
think we'd have to get permission from the general
Might have
assembly.
to. It might not be worth it, I just thought.
60 other counties have the same problem we do.
Yeah, we'd be better not to have it like
It might be something we could even ask the Baker.
Yeah.
that. Even
Yeah.
take the COVID out
There
of
you
the
go.
situation with the census and everything, everything's so much up in the air.
The state did get sued by 2 candidates that want to run for, I don't know if it was governor or lieutenant governor, to drop the signature requirements during COVID, and they reduced it from 10,000 to 2,000.
Which is a big drop for a statewide.
Yeah, but still, what happens to those 2,000 people?
Yeah, I know.
Weird.
My suggestion is to just charge a fee, forget the signatures, write you a check to the state of Virginia. They're always looking for money anyway.
Well, it's supposed to show support, you know.
Support comes on.
I know,
Takes 20 people.
So we have, so that was the one ask for the electoral board for you, and you've got that in front of you. Amy has another issue that's come up around our electronic poll books, and I'll let her talk to you about that.
Yeah, we love the program that is our electronic poll books where you check in on a laptop at the polls and, it makes reporting easier at the end of the election, upload your thumb drives and unfortunately, they have decided not to seek recertification in Virginia due to, I think, how much the state board charges them to recertify. And the state has new minimum security standards that went into effect, and it's 400 standards because I just did the survey with Tech Squared, and that's another meeting. I'll be talking to you about a few things, but so there's 4 vendors certified in Virginia. Well, 2 that have finished certification, 2 in the midst of it and expected to certify. Of those 4, 1 vendor has 1 client in Virginia, 1 vendor has 2 clients in Virginia. The other 2 have the remainder. And I would feel more comfortable going with one that's tried and true, that I know some coworkers have in other places. So, Hart is a vendor for no ink poll pad, and Hart is also our rating equipment vendor. And we have had just a great experience using Hart for our optical scanners, and they've been really, really responsive and good. So we're still looking at all 4, but we're leaning towards that one. I have some questions on the electoral board tonight that we want to ask about little details of how it all works, but all 4 estimates I got were in a couple $1,000s of each other, and they're all like between 20 and 20, or 22 to 25,000, something like that.
So Hart wasn't the most expensive.
No. they were, I'm sure they all know what each other charged. They were very close.
Yeah.
So the pricing is good because we could look at features we want and, instead of going on the price, since they're so similar, I think.
Right.
This pole pad, it's an Apple-based product and it's on a tablet. It's a touch screen. It has a scanner. You can hold up your driver's license, your voter card, and boom, pulls you up. It's, the demos, it looks pretty, user-friendly, pretty nifty. So I do have a few more questions. We had a virtual demo with Hart, and they had a network connection problem, and they couldn't get online to do it the other day, so we haven't got to complete that.
That must have been embarrassing.
Yes, yeah. They kept saying, it's not the pole pad, it's the network. And,
Just saying.
right, yeah, it wasn't the equipment, it was their network, so, anyway, the state did say they will let us use what we currently have to the end of June, but we don't like the thought of having a brand new system at a November big election. We sort of like to break in and train with the slower election. So we were looking at trying to replace our system pretty quickly. Unfortunately. And for the money. So that's where we stand, and I've asked numerous people at the state if there's any grants or any help, because these localities that had the system are kind of left out, and so far they haven't come up with anything.
She knew what my question was going to be.
Yeah. Still have a few feelers out, but
Not looking good.
no.
So,
Did you have anything to add, Mike or Bob?
Well, we just felt it would be good to have single source for all the training, because they're already doing training on the other machines.
Yeah.
It was a lot more convenient for us, and thought we probably had a savings right there.
To have a common vendor, when they come in to do training, they can train on all of it. rather
Or
than-
upgrade? Something like that.
So you're talking about the 22,645 number, or the 18,925?
The 22, because,
do we have to pay the annual poll fee too?
hey, the actual what?
Annual poll fee?
Well,
That's
the second year, the first year it covers your license and support.
Gotcha.
On year 2, you would pick up.
So that is a recurring fee every year.
Part of your budget.
Right.
That's part of our budget.
Moving forward.
In our current public, we do have a, recurring fee. It's much less than this, but they did tell us we'll get anything we pay, like prorate, and return it, but I don't think it will be a lot.
But the difference, to the point you were talking about, Bob was mentioning, instead of having to have 2 separate training sessions,
Right.
you'll have one, and that'll probably make up the difference
Right,
between
savings.
what we're paying now and what we're paying a little more here.
And you also said that the ease of which this should speed things up, correct, with just being able to scan a license or a voter card, that.
Yeah, and it looked like in the demo that a voter could stand there and hold it, and that would be one less touch point
Right.
of handing your license to the person. That's what it looked like. I do want to, you see it has a thermal printer, it's kind of pricey, $350 each.
Yeah.
I want to talk to localities and see
Yeah.
if they think that printer, if what it provides is worth the cost.
If you remember, when we don't have COVID, we use those cards as a poll pass. You
Right.
check in, you get a card, and you give that to the person to get your ballot. We can still do that, and we don't really need these printers, possibly.
They said it's a good audit log, that it would print like a
Right.
voter's name and like you know, if you had a mix up of junior, senior, or different things, you'd have that. But
So we don't know what June's gonna be like, obviously, with all of what we're dealing with now. And then, moving forward, there may be stricter regulations placed on elections to try and keep everyone healthier. So this kind of system where you scan the license, the owner of said card or license is the person that's actually doing the scanning. So it would seem to me that this, as you said, Mr. Booth, might fall under possible funding. Do you know if elections will get any, and I know this is a crystal ball, in your discussions with other registrars throughout the state, does it appear that the state will be providing COVID funding for elections?
we have not heard any either way.
Okay.
I would hope so, but we do believe we have enough masks and sanitizers and stuff for June that we had left over. I think we're good on those things.
Would this qualify for the COVID money?
This is a little gray because it can't be anything we've already got budgeted, and we weren't already gonna do the primary. That's not in the budget, right?
Well, actually, last year I did put the June primary in my budget, but it's just that November's cost exceeded everything, and I
So it
spent
was
it
already
in
budgeted,
November.
So it
so
was
we
already
can't do it.
budgeted, yeah.
Yes.
Jeez.
I mean, I think the only thing you can justify is the additional cost to
That's what I
the
think
primary,
too.
which this wouldn't
Right.
necessarily,
Right.
this is a complete, we're going to have to buy this whether there's COVID or not.
Right.
Yeah.
What I would foresee here is using contingency for the new pad, but wait on the 13,000, tell them they could go ahead. We might be able to use the CARES money for some of that. And then at the end, look and see how much we have in surplus in other departments we could move, how much we could use out of CARES, and then maybe have to take some other contingency.
And I was thinking at the end, you know, our entire department budget, it might come out in the positive and we could divert any of that
Carry over.
extra over, yes.
Carry over.
Right, so what you're suggesting, Cindy, is we wouldn't really take any action on the primary money. You would go ahead and spend it, you'd have an overage of whatever that is, and then at the end of the year, we'll balance it out. Whereas this would be an actual expenditure that we need to approve out of contingency. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep, it does.
And the primary could change, so you may,
Absolutely.
you know, I think it's, if I remember right, it's February sometimes when the Republicans have to have it, it's a deadline, they have to say one way or the other, whether it's convention or.
Yeah, there is a deadline, I can't remember.
So I mean, that could be an additional, you may need more ballots or whatever that,
Right.
because they've been meeting once a week almost, so I'm trying to discuss how that's gonna work, so.
Yeah. If they have a convention, is it gonna be an in-person convention?
That's
Is that what you're hearing, or you don't know?
Well, from what Bob may correct me, but, from what I've heard and watched, I've been watching their online meetings,
Oh, yeah.
and from what I could tell, they voted to have a convention. The party plan doesn't allow them to have a unassembled convention, so the desire for some is to have maybe in each county have a convention that would then send votes electronically somehow. But the party plan doesn't allow that. There's not enough votes. They need 3/4 of the votes
Wow.
in the executive committee or whatever to pass that change. They don't have the votes to do that. They have enough to have the convention, but there's no place that allow them to have the convention probably. So they're in this absolute limbo.
Yeah.
They've been meeting once a week to discuss the same thing over and over and over and over. It's just going in, it's like the circular firing squad. It's a little.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty.
So I think, I may be wrong, but I think from what I've read is that they could still switch back to a primary in the next couple of weeks, but I may be wrong about that.
And if they
Yeah, I
do,
think they can, yeah. the
I thought they said it was a
Would
deadline.
that primary be on the same day as the other one?
It would just be more voters coming. You
Right.
expect, so that may be.
It's on the same day.
And there would be more cost associated with ballots.
Ballots.
Right, because you got a whole separate set of ballots.
Yeah.
But the staffing would all
Should
be.
be sufficient, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Anyway,
And we will take, every measure we can to be very frugal with the.
Well, on that note, I would like to say that, I have watched the electoral board and have been so impressed with their frugality, but making sure that every citizen in this county was able to place a vote. Whether they wanted to do it early or in person at the polls, whether they needed assistance or did not. I just want to say that, I have been duly impressed by the workings of our board, as well as the registrar and her staff and all of the employees.
Thank you, we appreciate that. At the beginning, didn't know how it was all going to come together, or so much going so fast with changes. But, we assembled a great team of staff and election officers, and it worked out great.
22, yeah.
So I will be calling you, Cindy, as well.
on the, I got one other question.
Okay.
On the 22,645, can we do that as a sole source, or do we need to bid that out? How is that?
It's under 25.
So it's under 25, so we're able to pick our vendor without.
Well, actually, elections is exempt from
Okay.
procurement because there's so few vendors.
So we can go ahead and approve that if we want
Make the
to.
motion? Yeah.
And like I said, we want to do a little more research just to make sure that's the one we want, but they're very similar.
But it would not be over that number.
No.
We could make the motion to approve up to
Up
that
to
amount
that number, and
without,
authorize the signatures and whatever.
without having an actual vendor.
Right.
Or just authorize that much to move from.
If you're ready, I'd make that motion.
I'll second that.
Motion second, any other discussion? None?
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes.
Ms. Cliftonbrook,
Yes.
Mr. Booth,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
motion passes.
Can y'all get together on the other one, figure out what may qualify and what won't, and then we can take it up in another meeting.
Thank you for these
You're welcome.
papers.
I think that was,
Appreciate it,
thank you
yeah.
all for.
Thank you. We appreciate all y'all's work. Great job this year.
Yeah.
We even thank Bob.
Well, we started early.
Thank you all.
Y'all have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank all of you, thank you.
Get started. Oh, that way we can, I think they're right as far as the, use it in primary versus secondary work.
Get all the kinks out.
Covered up my agenda there. What's next on that stuff?
Representative from.
Ready?
Yep.
Hmm.
Right.
You need intro music or anything?
Make that thing to Rocky. I'm going to turn my time over to Brad Barber from Federal Engineering. He's going to discuss the radio communication system study that they have done. This project was a little bit out of the county's grasp, so we hired their firm. They've done a lot of good work. They've worked with myself, Justin Coleman, Jerry Booth, Terry Morris, and doing a lot of research. But with all that said, I'll let him do the talk. Thanks, Brad.
And there again, let's let him make his presentation and then call our questions to this time.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Barber, as Kevin had mentioned, Director of Operations with Federal Engineering, a consulting firm that was hired to do the study for you. There's a lot of information to go through here. I will go through it as quickly as I can. And if you, like you mentioned, if you have any detailed questions you'd like to ask after the presentation, we're certainly available to do that. We had a couple things I want to start off with. We're going to just kind of quickly review the scope of the work that we began, the findings related to that work, the alternatives we've identified for upgrading or replacing existing systems, and what the next steps are based on the outcome of these studies. We had a project initiation meeting with Kevin and county staff, just to kind of set the boundaries and objectives for projects. We're all on the same sheet of music in terms of what we were looking to accomplish. We conducted an evaluation of what you currently have, tried to identify what are the gaps that we're trying to close in terms of system performance and things like that. The key thing is part of the evaluation of any kind of radio system. I use this phrase a lot: coverage is king. It's kind of like your cell phones. If you don't have coverage, it really doesn't matter, right? Same thing is true for public safety. And at the end of this phase of work, we provided a report, which I think you got a copy of in your packet, which is sort of a summary of what we did for the project and what the alternatives are. So first thing we do when we start one of these projects is we gather as much existing system documentation as you have, right? We don't ask you to create any new documentation, but what you have we want to take a look at. And that kind of informs some of the things we look at going forward in terms of what are the potential alternatives and what are some of the issues. We also assess some of the sites that you're currently using to see if they're reusable in any way. Can we leverage those sites as part of the new system design? We also did electronic surveys of the major public safety users to try to understand, again, what are their issues from their perspective and what are the gaps in terms of operations. We summarized the issues we identified with the users in a summary memo that was sent to Kevin as well. So we kind of came down to two different alternatives for you guys. The first is to refresh what you have today, basically update the equipment, bring in all new subscriber equipment, portable and mobile radios, etc., but not really change the basic technology that you're using for the public safety radio system. The second option would be to upgrade to public safety standards-based Project 25 system, which is a digital technology, which is sort of where everything's going these days, right? All of any new developments for technology are going to be in the digital world, not in the analog. We conducted a coverage workshop to analyze the differences between those two alternatives. Also looked at identifying some alternative sites to provide additional coverage, using information supplied by Kevin and others in the county staff. Excuse me. And once we got done with that, we developed some budgetary cost proposals for both of those alternatives. Another key point of this is to try to sort of identify what are the differences between the two alternatives, right? What are the positives and negatives of each, and how we might be able to close those gaps from additional alternatives and options for those alternatives. All those things were summarized in the report that you were provided as part of your packet. So what are the current system issues? This is sort of a common theme in public safety. We have a lot of systems out there that are 20, 30 plus years old, been developed over time, and they don't provide coverage in the areas where you need to have coverage. Your demographics have changed. You have people living in different areas. You have new businesses in different areas, etc. And you might not have coverage where you originally put your system in to provide that coverage. Second issue is capacity. That's basically the ability for the system to not have a busy to someone who's trying to call in and make a public safety call. That's not a huge issue for your guys, but it could be an issue down the road. The other major issue we found was that the system's old, quite frankly. It's been in place for quite some time. A lot of the equipment is end of life, right? You're looking at a potential lack of support from the manufacturers, etc. The other thing we noticed as we were doing the evaluation of your system is also some limited redundancy in the system. In other words, if one critical component were to fail, the whole system would be down. Okay? Last but not least, one of the system features, we didn't go into all of them on this slide, but one of the primary system features that public safety really relies on these days is location information, right? When an officer or a firefighter presses the emergency button on their radio, the dispatcher will know that person has an incident that they need assistance with, or they're in trouble or something going on that requires an additional response. They don't know where those people are, right? They have a general idea where was the call dispatched. If you have a foot pursuit or something like that, that's a rapidly evolving event, right? And that officer might be in a totally different area from where that incident originally started, okay? Well, the location services that are offered with the digital technology will allow the dispatcher to know where they're at. And so when they're dispatching additional personnel, they know where to go. Again, the alternatives we looked at, as I mentioned earlier, was to refresh the existing system. You currently have a 2-site simulcast system, which means the same information is broadcast at both towers at the same time. For both of these alternatives, we added an additional greenfield site. When we did the coverage analysis, we looked at sites in the area to try to find one that's already built that would work for you, but in most cases, the places you have coverage holes need new greenfield sites. There's not really any sites there that will work. For the P25 system, again, it's a 3-site system using P25 digital technology with the same greenfield site. Even with 3 sites, we still couldn't cover the totality of the areas you need covered. So we also looked at an option for a 4th site up in the northeast corner of the county for both of the alternatives. And this is a little bit of an eye chart, I know. My guys love to throw lots of maps in these things. So. And it's good because you can kind of see the differences. On each one of these maps, you'll see on the left-hand side what we call talk-out coverage. That's from the radio system out to the field user. And the other map is talk-in from the field user back into the system. There's always a little bit of an imbalance between those two because the field units are talking at much lower power. So they can't talk in as well as the system can talk out to them. We try to alleviate as much of that as we can using some technological things like tower top preamps and things like that. So you can never quite totally get that totally balanced. Okay? So here, if you want to look at what's the worst case scenario, look at the map on the right hand side. That's talk in from the field. So that kind of gives you an idea. There's 3 different colors on there based on what type of radio it is that's trying to talk into the system and where they're at, right? So the purple coverage is a mobile radio trying to talk into the system. The yellow coverage is a portable outdoors, and the green coverage is a portable in a 10 dB or what we call a light building. Okay? So that's what alternative 1 looks like, coverage map for that. You can see that the Project 25, P25 system map's a little bit better than that. You can also see that big, I guess, sort of magenta dot on there is one of the greenfield sites we were talking about earlier. If we add a 4th site, that again improves the coverage a little bit more for both alternatives. This one here is for the analog refresh, and the next one's for the P25 system with a 4th site added to it. This might be a little bit easier to read. This sort of just a tabular representation of the different coverages provided by the alternative. As you can see, there's a pretty significant difference between what the existing system provides today, what's predicted to be provided, and what the alternatives could provide above and beyond that level of coverage. Obviously, if you had the funds to do it, we'd recommend you go with alternative 2, the P25 with 4th site. Because that provides the highest level of coverage of all 4 of the alternatives that we looked at. Before I leave off that slide, I just wanted to note, we also have the cost in there, so you can sort of see the cost benefit, right? I'll talk about this more in a minute, but digital technology costs more than analog, so that's why you see the difference in the cost. Another kind of eye chart for me, because I can't read that far of it. We tried to summarize the differences, compare the 2 alternatives between the analog enhancement and the P25 system upgrade or replacement. Everything else being equal, the P25 system, as you've seen, would provide better coverage overall, but it does so at a higher cost, right? The P25 equipment, it's digital, it has more capabilities, it has more features and functions you can add to the system later. And the equipment typically is built to a little bit higher specification than analog equipment, so it costs more. And that's just the cut and dried answer to that one. Subscriber devices, if we replace them for the analog, we'd probably just replace them with something similar to what you already have, just refreshed with new equipment. P25 would require all new P25 based equipment for the subscriber radios. Either option could be competitively bid and procured. You would have a slightly fewer number of vendors for P25 because there's about 4 or 5 major players in the P25 market. There are more in the analog market, but not much more. Probably looking at 6 to 7 potential vendors. In terms of interoperability, your ability for your county to talk to other counties adjacent to you, it's really sort of dependent upon what your neighbors have, right? It's like anything else. If your neighbors have a P25 system and they're in the same band you'd be interoperable. If you're in the same band in the analog world, you'd be interoperable. P25 probably provides more interoperability for you long term, right? Because that's where the market's going. That's what those public safety agencies are migrating to. That's what Roanoke is on, for example. System enhancements we talked about a little bit earlier. Analog is an older legacy technology. Vendors are not creating new features and functions for that technology. It's sort of just refreshing what you already have and the capability that you currently have. All of your digital technologies, and P25 in particular for public safety, are all being continually evaluated to see what needs to be enhanced, what needs to be added to that standard so that it continues to meet the needs of public safety users. Both of the alternatives could be upgradable. Right? You could put in an analog system now, upgrade it to a P25 system later, provided you procure it in the correct way with the right specifications. P25 could start out conventional and be changed to trunking later, which is important to make the system more efficient. So you got a little bit more option there in terms of upgradability as well. Both the designs start out as 3 sites unless we add the 4th optional site. So now you get down to the brass tacks. What does all this cost? These cost estimates we consider to be conservative. Obviously, we don't want to tell you something's going to cost this much money and it ends up being 10, 15, 20% more. So what we typically do is when we put the conceptual designs together, we do the estimates at the vendor's list price, right? So it's the list price kind of sort of quantities you're seeing here. The one sort of gray area we typically run into is site civils and improvements. When you go out and put a greenfield site in, until you actually start some of the civil work, you don't know, for instance, what the cost might end up being. I've had situations where you go out there, they go to put in a new site and find out that they need to, bore 50 to 100 feet down to get a good grounding or put in a proper foundation depending on the structure of the ground at that site, etc. So that one has some unknowns in it that you won't be able to get into until you identify the exact sites that you're going to put your equipment at. As I mentioned earlier, the subscriber equipment for all of the P25 stuff in the alternative 2 is going to be a little bit more expensive, again, because it has more capabilities and the equipment has a little bit more stringent specifications. But if you look at sort of the big ticket items, obviously you can see you're looking at 2.4 and change for alternative 1, 3.1 for alternative 2 if you don't do the 4th optional greenfield site. You add that site in, you're looking at 3.2 versus, 3.9 for alternative 2. So where do we go from here? We've given you the alternatives. We've provided the report. You have to decide, which alternative you want to move forward with. Once you make that determination, then we can begin phase 2 of the project, which is to develop functional specifications that you can put out on the street for bid, and then determine which way you want to go with it after that. Our firm develops functional specifications for you and assists you through the procurement process if that's which way you want to go. We always do functional specifications that are designed around what you tell us you want to pursue, right? Just want to put another point out there. You could put out a bid that has a base option, right, for a particular system and technology with an option for P25 or for an expanded, 4th site, etc. So you can sort of see what that cost help is going to be directly from the vendors. And we've done that in multiple different procurements. And then once we, obviously if you put that invitation to get out there, we'll help you through that process and then help you evaluate the vendors as well. We've done this, nationwide since 1983, so we know all the vendors' approaches and their strategies for how they try to gain some of these procurements, so we can certainly help you through that process as well. All right, I know I talked really fast. I tried to get as much information up as I could, but I'm available for any questions you might have at this point.
First of all, I want to say thank you to the ones that are involved in this process, because this is a really important, this is really important for the county. We've got a sheriff's office that is underpaid, just as many sheriff's offices are across the Commonwealth, and we've got volunteer fire and rescue here that work helping volunteering in dangerous situations just because they love the community. And we've got paid EMS that are, not making big money, doing really, stressful work. And frankly, the more that we can do to keep those folks safe, all of those people safe, we need to step up and do it, because I spent over 10 years as a volunteer firefighter here. I can't tell you how many times we've had, you arrive on scene, you realize, and I ran EMS as well, you arrive on scene, you realize, oh my goodness, there's the fire is in the walls, we need this equipment. All right, let's drive to the top of the hill and try to get a call out so that we can get X coming. Or, oh my goodness, somebody, you get a call for someone that's fallen, and you get there and you realize they had a heart attack, and we need to call lifeguard, and now we've got to leave that person and drive to the top of the hill to be able to, call. We can't get them aid. We've got to get a call from help, and we can't do it from there. And I'm sure it's the same way for the sheriff's office that shows up, needs something, don't have any contact with dispatch. I mean, I can't imagine that feeling. So it's really important for the people we have, but it's really important for our citizens too, because so I just want to say thank you for all y'all that were involved in that.
So a couple of questions, echoing everything that Lauren said, for sure. How new is the P25 system?
P25 is a technology that's been out since the late 90s.
Wow.
But it has, like I mentioned earlier, the standard is, it's a user-driven approach for the P25 standard, right? Public safety users from around the United States and around the world, right, get together to try to develop the standard for P25 and to make sure that it stays current. Right. So it's been around since the late 90s, but it continues to be refreshed and expanded, and capabilities and features added to it over time.
You work all across the country?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question about Virginia. How many legacy analog systems are left in the Commonwealth?
I couldn't give you an exact number as to how many analog.
I mean,
I know a lot of our rural clients are still on analog.
Are still on analog.
Right.
Okay. Across the country.
Across the country, right.
Okay.
The more rural the area is, the more likely they are still be on analog.
Okay. All right. And what other counties, other than Roanoke, you mentioned, are using the P25?
Well, pretty much everybody in the Hampton Roads region and
Right.
the Capital region.
How about around us? Just Roanoke?
Roanoke, I know for sure. Some of the other counties are looking at it. In fact, we're getting ready to start another project with the Twin Counties to the south of you, I guess.
Okay.
With Galax and the Twin Counties. And they actually asked us if there'd be some synergy there, right? If you guys decide to move forward, maybe we could look at sharing some control equipment, things like that. That would be something we could look at going forward.
Right.
But there are, again, trying to give you an exact number of how many P25 systems, how many analog systems, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
Okay. In terms of frequencies, if we go with the whole system, put the other side up, the Greenfield side up, and the northeastern section of the county, what do you believe is the difficulty in getting a new megahertz signal for that? Do you think that would be difficult for us? Or is the FCC looking at public safety in a new light, or do we not know?
Well, I don't know if they're looking at you in a new light. It's hard to tell some days what light the FCC looking at.
Oh, I know. I'm in radio, so I know.
I think, one of the things we looked at is we could deploy the system on existing frequencies that you have.
Right? Even with the fourth site?
Even with the foresight.
Okay.
Right? And we don't foresee there being licensing issues associated with doing that. Right?
Okay.
The challenge is, you're probably aware, of trying to deploy a new system on existing frequencies, and now I've got a split system. Right? You're going to have some people operating on the old system, some people trying to migrate to the new system. That means you're going to lose a little bit of capacity on both during that transition. We could look at other bands, right? 700, 800 are available. It's certainly going to be available for a rural county, right? Those frequencies don't tend to be used a lot in the state plans. So that's something else we could look at. The propagation characteristics for that band, 700, 800, are a little bit different, right? They don't travel quite as far, so we might have to look at, do we need more sites than that? And that's the risk you run into when you start looking at moving upward in the band. The advantages of moving up, those clean spectrum. Right. You're not going to have the interference issues that you have today. You're not going to have skip that you get quite frequently in UHF band, right? So that's an advantage of looking at going to 780.
Right.
But I wouldn't foresee a problem licensing, a new system, refreshing it on your existing channels with the added sites. We don't foresee that to be a problem.
Okay. I think that was all I'd written. I do want to say, I know we paid you, but I just want to say that this was, I read it cover to cover, studied the maps, and I also want to thank everybody who was involved, but this was a very well written and understandable package that was, this is sort of my thing, so I found it enjoyable to read, but I just want to thank you for doing such a good job. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Kevin and his staff, because they really helped us out a lot as well. It's sort of key for us coming in as a consultant, to be able to work with county staff to understand what your real issues are, right? We don't try to come in with a presupposed opinion about what you need, right? We want to hear from you and make our determination based on that.
Right.
And I appreciate the comments on the report. I'll let my guys know that we're happy with it.
Please do. And I just want to say that public safety and the safety of our first responders are of utmost importance to me. So
Absolutely.
I just want to go on the record saying that.
And some of the equipment we're replacing is some of the equipment that the board I got to serve with in the 90s,
Yeah.
bought to begin with.
Right.
And it was prior to this P program being available.
Oh, yeah.
I think at the time, if we had that as an option, we would have probably already been there.
Right. Going to digital
But
and analog, yeah.
we were ahead of, I'm talking in 93, 94, and this came out like 97, 98.
Yeah, about that time.
Somewhere in that range. But, I agree, for me, if we can make it safer for our first responders, then
And it's a lot safer for our citizens too.
it is too.
It really is. It's not just the 300 people that are involved in public safety in the county. It's when I have a heart attack on the backside of Buffalo, it may literally get me to the hospital 15 minutes earlier. That's literally what it could do.
I started the sheriff's department in 77. And if I was in my driveway, I had to call Patrick County to sign me off. If I was in Justin's district, I'd have to go to Pulaski.
Right.
Go down this end, I'd have to go through Roanoke, And it was scary sometimes, And even by the time I left 10 years ago, it really helped us a lot. We're still way behind where we should be.
Yeah.
And Mr. Yoder said, it's not only officer safety, but our citizens too, because, them first responders out there, and they need something that's, like Lauren said, you don't have to run to the top of a hill or climb a tree to get out, you know? And so it's about time we upgraded.
There's no worse feeling that I've probably ever had is doing CPR on somebody and knowing that with just a mobile radio, I couldn't talk to anybody. I didn't know when they were coming, when the rescue squad would actually get there. I didn't know when, you know, and I knew once we got a mobile unit there, we could talk. So, you know, it's just try to keep somebody alive until they get there. You know, that's a terrible feeling if you don't know if they're 20 minutes away or 5 minutes away. And, you're holding somebody's life in your hands. It's
I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but taking myself out of the equation, I just want to stress just a few things. And the first one I'd like to start with is, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, let's have just a couple minutes. There was a lot of, again, taking myself out of this, a lot of work, a lot of effort put into this. Mr. Booth and I met with Mr. Sowers several occasions. You know, a lot of work, and I appreciate Federal being so good because there was a lot of questions, and Kevin did a tremendous job of making sure that every avenue, there is not one stone that's left unturned, I feel like, as a part of this committee. Anything he could think about, he asked. And we were a part of those emails, and there was a lot of them. Can we do this? What difference will this make? And personally, I appreciate the fact that we spent nearly, I guess, probably 6 hours going through various parts of the county and getting GPS locations and sending it to Federal and having them look at it and seeing, because this, to me, this document is probably one of the most heavy documents that I've looked at since I've been on the board. And what I say is that is it encompasses a lot of people, first responders and our citizens.
Yeah.
And I thought so much about this, and Mr. Yoder's alluded to it so well. One of the most empty feelings is when tragedy befalls a friend, a neighbor, somebody in your community, and not being able to effectively communicate. Communication is key, and we know that communication is the first thing that goes. And I feel like that is one thing that we have to provide as a board, is the ability for our citizens to be cared for. And I said that before, as we all have. This is a part of that. This is a huge part of that. We can have the best equipment, the best apparatus, but if we can't talk, we're hurting. And we're hurting for our citizens. When we're standing there and the family's looking at us in the eyes, wondering why we can't do more, but we don't have an answer. It's difficult. So that's why I say this is a very heavy document. And I just appreciate the work, the effort that's went into it. I don't take it lightly. It's a big price tag. It's a big price tag either way.
Yeah.
And so again, I want to just appreciate everybody that worked on this, and Mr. Sowers and you guys being so patient of exploring every option. I mean, Kevin thought out of the box things that really caught me off guard. He worked hard. He has the best interest for the county and work for sure. So I hope we can come together and see something happen for our community.
You know, one of the surprises that I found was I did not realize how good coverage was somewhat in the valley. Reading through these maps.
That's just happened in the last few years.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just was floored because I figured that we'd need 3 greenfield sites, to be honest with you. The other question that I had was, who are the P25 vendors in close to us? Is Harris in Virginia?
L3 Harris, it's L3 Harris now, not just Harris.
Oh, down in
Lynchburg.
Lynchburg.
Yeah, they're a big P25 vendor.
Good.
Motorola continues to be sort of the 800-pound gorilla in the market, historically.
Right.
E.F. Johnson has been acquired by JDC Kenwood.
Okay.
They're also a
Kenwood,
P25 system vendor, and those are the 3 that you're most likely going to see.
Okay.
There are some other smaller players in the market as well, but those are the top 3, if you will. Motorola and Harris tend to duke it out more often than JVC Kenwood, E.F. Johnson does. So.
And would you help with any grant work?
We can certainly help you take a look at that. I know there's another window coming up on the state side to look at. That's one of the conversations we're having to with the 20 counties as well. They're trying to get their costs pulled together so they can submit a proposal, I think in the April timeframe.
Okay.
And that's another thing I want to point out, if you're looking at grant funding on a federal perspective, if there's any available, P25 equipment is more likely to get grant funding than analog equipment.
That was gonna be my next.
Also, systems that are regional in nature tend to be more likely to get federal grant funding.
Okay.
Just a couple of things to think about. So if there were some synergies with the 20 county cooperative, that might be an option to put in a regional package that would be more likely to get grant funding.
So we're talking about Grayson and
Grayson and Carroll.
Yeah,
And then
then the
J-Lac.
city of Galax.
Right.
Gotcha.
I'm curious about the interoperability. Would we no longer be able to communicate with Patrick, Franklin, and Montgomery?
What we typically try to do is once you make a decision about what technology you're going to look at, then we put in what we call gateways that allow you to interconnect your system to their system if they're on a different one than you're on or a different band that you're on. So you'd still have some interoperability be patched to the dispatch center.
Dispatch and patch.
Right, yeah.
Which is essentially what happens now.
Yeah.
Right.
And I can just say from a fire perspective, what we've done is, if there's stations that we ran calls with on a regular basis, we would actually, at one point, I know we had a mobile radio in Station 3 fire from Reiner.
Right.
And so the first run truck had a radio on a charger in the truck with their, mobile, that was actually their radio. And you could talk to them on the way with that mobile radio if they called you in as a second duty, if there was a fire on the line. So, I mean, that's something you can still do if you want to have direct contact.
And the other thing you can do is also put in a multi-band radio if you end up in a different band than your neighbor agency, right? And you have a fire district or something that interoperates a lot with, across the county border.
Right.
I look at multi-band radios for those units, right?
Right, yeah. One of the questions I had that I may have missed it, but what's the difference between the analog and the P25 just from mobile to mobile? Is there a difference there from like a handheld unit as far as how well it works, and they're pretty much the same?
It's pretty close. P25, digital technology as a rule tends to operate a little bit further range than analog. But the difference between analog and digital, with analog, it gets real scratchy, and then you got nothing. With digital, it gets a little bit poppy and it's gone. Right, because that's the forward error correction just stops. So there's too many errors here for me to process that audio, right? So it's kind of like the transition we did for TV stations, right, from analog.
Right.
The picture on the digital TV is a lot clearer, but it might not get all the points the analog signal did, right? So, we thought the same level of audio quality.
I have one more question. In the cost estimates, that does not include the cost for federal engineering to do the procurement or to do the project management.
It does not.
And it doesn't include the land or any land development
It
fees.
doesn't include site acquisition costs, no, because until we decide which site we're going to look at.
Site acquisition and site preparation for
Site civils were included, site acquisition
Site
was
civils,
not.
yeah. Now, site civils, did that include all of, like from,
Build the
bulldozer
road, put a
to
fence
tower?
in, yeah, well, the tower is included in the radio system cost.
right, but, okay,
Operating and site preparation.
Yeah.
right.
Building the road, creating the area the building's gonna go in, all those sorts of things, putting in grounding for that facility.
EMS guideline, the whole shebang.
And I also noticed that you had HVACs and generators. Is there any thought, does FE do any work with solar?
We haven't seen a lot of solar deployments. That's certainly a possibility. You can look at the thing on the side of the site.
Okay.
You'd probably be right on the borderline of doing solar. So there might be some remote sites want to look at that as an option.
Okay.
More typically, you're looking at, standard diesel or LP generators, UPSs, that kind of thing.
Right.
Just provides a little bit more robustness than solar does. But solar is an option, but we only typically look at it for very, very remote sites.
All right.
We've done it a lot in mountaintop sites.
Okay.
Especially if they're on forestry property.
And that's one of the problems. We started addressing this in 06, 07. And we tried to piecemeal it. That's when they bought the radios. And we said, well, we'll do it in stages. Well, that didn't work.
Yeah, you can't stage it.
Because you had a bump in
Yeah.
financially in the road, then it went away.
Right.
You can't stage
And I had originally thought on this, that, you know, I'd asked about that, but after thinking about, well, this is something we need to do in one fluid motion.
Mm-hmm.
Or I
Interest rates
think-
are at a good point right now. If you're gonna
Start
do it,
lows.
you might as well do it, because honestly, if you did it in stages, you're gonna end up paying more interest rates, you might pay more and more.
Well,
And
and
the frustration.
Oh, it's just,
All of it.
Well, the other problem you run into is phase deployment, and I've meant to mention this earlier, sometimes you end up with some sunk costs there too, right? Because you put in certain equipment, and then maybe it takes you 4, 5, 6 years to do the next phase. That equipment now has to either be upgraded
Yeah, it's already obsolete.
or replaced, because it's already, because the life cycle is.
we're already in that point.
Right.
We did before, so.
Exactly. And more of these systems are built with commercial off-the-shelf technology, IT switches and routers, right? IT switch doesn't last you 10 years.
Yeah.
You're replacing that thing like every 2, 3 years, if you're lucky,
Yeah.
right? So it's a whole different paradigm.
Yep.
Although we have been known,
Down in Berry's Creek, through Max Manson, you know.
we have been known to squeeze every bit of life out of a piece of equipment though.
You're not alone in that regard. trust me.
what do we need to do to move forward?
Thank you.
Thank you. I would think, Kevin, you help us out here.
Yeah,
Bag of money?
thank you, Brad.
Yeah, thank you, Brett.
Do we need to authorize to put the bid and see what the bids come in, or is that the next step, or what?
Well, I was gonna ask you, under item 10D, we have discussion of seeking financing. Do you wanna make a decision about the equipment first and then talk about financing, or do you wanna roll it all together in one conversation?
We don't have a choice from TMB, do we? It's already been,
He's got some good news on it.
yeah, I'm getting ready to say, whooping us.
Well, how about we just, talk about everything in 10D? I don't mind.
10D.
Mhm.
Okay.
You all got me lost here.
That's okay. We don't got it.
Okay.
I'm taking it that there seems to be consensus to go with alternative 2 with the P25, but with 3 sites or 4 sites?
I'm thinking 4 sites was, that
There's no
was,
piecemeal here. I mean, we've got to make a commitment.
that's the 3.9, correct?
Yeah.
4 sites.
4 point.
And I was gonna recommend you guys, and I'm glad that Mr. Booth already highlighted on it, because, previously when we started a radio system upgrade, unlike Joe, I remember you had to talk to other counties, you was lucky to talk to Floyd from Willis, and that was with 100-watt radios. We got the new system, and it just seemed like the best thing since, peanut butter, but now, we've come to this road again. And, there was good plans made when Mr. Booth was in office then. It just didn't get followed through all the way. I think, even back then, they said 4 sites.
Yeah.
And, we're not,
Yeah.
I would rather see us go all in or not touch it. Because it's,
Not touching is not an option.
it's not one of those,
now.
well, see, if we just barely dabble into this and put this in one year and do that again, you're actually gonna, in my opinion, and I may be wrong, you're going to lose some signal going to digital versus analog unless you do it all at once. It's to me, it's all or nothing, and I don't make these hard decisions, y'all do, but I highly recommend that. There was one other thing, you was talking about channel spacing. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I may have been told wrong, but like with P25, when you go from analog to digital, that one channel turns into 2.
It can.
Can, okay.
And P25 offers two different options. It offers phase one, which is your standard, one talk path per channel. Phase two offers you two talk paths per channel, right? Phase two would be a little bit more expensive than what we quoted, but it is sort of future-proofing your system.
I know, the sheriff's department, they have some room for growth, I believe, as far as to meet some of their needs, and we'll talk about that maybe later, but I was just hitting on that.
Can I ask a question then, when you were talking about 700 and 800, does that cost more money to go to the new?
The band is, no, that doesn't drive a cost element.
Right. So it would be what kind of radios we buy?
That'd be the predominant.
Correct.
Yeah, the support.
Correct.
You may correct me if I'm wrong on this, but when you get into 700 and 800, it depends on how that wave, how it moves, how it can go through a building. And they did studies last time when we went to the 450 megahertz that megahertz is what worked the best in Floyd.
Gotcha.
To get the best range.
Understood.
The only caveat I would add to that, though, is that UHF does tend to be more prone to interference. So it might propagate better, but it's also more subject to interference. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there.
And that was when you were looking at analog, not digital.
Right.
Yeah.
But I would like to at least get an okay from the board to discuss a phase two with federal engineering. Try to work out some of the details while y'all look at the finance side of things or money side.
I don't have a problem with looking at the,
We won't sign any contracts or anything until we've bought it for you guys, but I feel comfortable with the work that they've done, and if we go to second step, I would like to have them in as a partner. And because if what they told us didn't work, we'll just ride them on the rail out.
There you go.
might be a barrel of tar around.
And, so with phase two, you're talking about authorizing federal engineering to go out to develop the specifications and going out to bid.
Yeah, but I think we need to sit down and just take a look at this and see what it entails, to have a better understanding between both of us, as they say.
So you would bring that back to us
Right.
to approve to go to bid then?
Yes, I would like to have a little bit of a negotiation with federal engineering on some of the
Okay,
cost. I mean, if we can save,
Yeah.
if we save money on something we can do, we worked pretty good last time on that, and I think we can do it again.
Well, and, there's been talk about this cooperative with the Twin Counties and
Right.
Cadillac, so, yeah, I'd like to explore.
And Jolena Young from Twin Counties, she contacted me about, contracting them, and I bragged on them, and I've worked with Twin County before on a couple of things, and it could bear fruit. You never know, especially on a regional thing. The only thing that would be the major obstacle I see is where we're at 453 megahertz, they're at 150 megahertz.
Really?
Yeah, and Patrick County's the same way. I know we talk about interoperability, but a lot of Montgomery County's about the only one that we really have true interoperability.
And they're at 400?
Yep.
Huh.
And I believe they're on some, like the police department's on digital. Am I correct about that?
I believe it's Blackbird.
It's Blackbird, okay. And they had federal engineering do their studies as well, so he could probably tell you more about them. But
All of our 911 communication systems upgrades that we've done,
yes,
how does that work into this?
we'll have to get new consoles but that's just that's actually in here.
Okay, right, I know.
But
Well, with everything that we did,
No, there's so many components to
Gotcha.
911. This is just,
You see what I'm saying? Yeah,
this is just a little bit.
gotcha,
Yeah,
Understood.
no, it's,
gotcha, okay.
it's pretty broad and just like
It's almost like a
radio
next step.
systems are just like what we deal with in the dispatch center is, end of life. 5 years it's spent and,
Yeah.
we rode this horse for 20 years and I hate to be the one to break the bad news, but
Yeah,
it's time. And,
yeah, understood.
yeah. Any questions for me?
Well, and also, I believe, we had talked about too, of this system going in, not disrupting our current system, that it's gonna work out where,
Sort of a seamless transition?
well, I won't say 100% seamless. I think that's a fair statement. It's not 100% seamless, but it should be a fairly smooth where there's minimal disruption to the,
Okay.
One of the things that kind of sped this up a little bit is, we've offered some tower space. AEP is putting up a radio antenna, and it's right next to where we're at now. We can take the new equipment, install it on the new tower site, and then slowly, we only got to do 2 sites, and we won't be dead in the water, but just for a little bit. And I think now's the time to do it if you're going to do it. But that's easier for me to say. Y'all are the ones that
Yeah.
have to figure out how to pay for it.
Do you feel that there's gonna be federal funds? I mean, we don't know.
that crystal ball's as dark as.
I know. And state funding for emergency management?
There's a little bit of Homeland Security money out there from time to time.
Okay,
But they look at what disaster is going on right now, and that's where they push funding.
right,
Right now, it's COVID.
yeah,
But basically, my opinion, we're gonna have to look at this, we're gonna have to pay for it. If something comes in that's icing on the cake,
absolutely, absolutely. I just wanna,
Oh,
I just want a voice to,
We'll make
citizens
sure
that
every
we're
avenue
gonna-
is looked at.
correct.
And there's other grant funding, like rescue's got options, fire's got options, but really, they utilize that funding to meet their own needs. And if we can get it through Homeland Security or I don't know, we'll sit down and talk about it.
Okay.
Especially, I agree with him 100%. If it's something regional, you can get some money for it. But if it's not regional, it's a hard road home.
And that's gonna depend their system versus ours.
Yeah, but I would say if they're updating, they will probably go to a different frequency if I had to guess.
Yeah.
It's,
Your tax money's in the pot too, remember that.
oh, I know, and I try to protect it as much as I can. It don't look like it tonight.
Yeah, boy, you're having a fun time tonight,
Yeah,
Kevin.
I don't ever get to bring small things to you guys, but, y'all have a tough decision, and I know you support public safety. I can give you guys examples of why there's a need for this, but most of you on this already know. We've had some close calls and, trying to do something about it.
Yep.
Now give us the good news.
Well, look.
Good news is, we got a good plan.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Look. All right. We'll move along to Station 2, which is Willis Fire Department. And, we inspect their engine. And want to present it to you guys. The main thing about why I'm here tonight, we kind of got behind. I had some medical issues. I was out, and it's just one thing after the other. But this has creeped up on us, and in a nutshell, you have the paperwork up there, this last form. And, the engine will come in, and this is on the Houston Galveston, actually 4 letters, Houston Galveston. It's a grant, it's a bid, government bid. Yep. The truck come in at $598,827. I got on front this evening. I cut several items out, left some in, and got it down to $579,393, which is, it's not a lot, but every bit helps.
Oh, yeah.
And we've done business with Pierce Manufacturing since '85, and there is one thing that we can save money on this thing, and it's quite a bit. We've never done this, but I have full faith in their capabilities, and that's because when we spec these trucks, it's got every nut and bolt out in a contract, and if they don't build it the way we say, we've got to combine the contract. We've got to fix it. But we can save $18,476 if we just go ahead and prepay for the truck. There's a little caveat to that. Most banks want like you go buy a car, in 60 days they want your title, 60 to 90 days. And I think Cynthia, I talked to them today. They said, well, we can provide you a VIN, but not an actual title. He said some banks take that. So that may be an option that Cindy's going to look at. There's probably no guarantees to it. I would have a 30% probability that they'll go along with that. Just throwing that out there. If we do not sign a bid on this truck within the next 30 days, it will go up 5%. It'll go up 5% yearly. At the $579,393, that puts an increase of $28,969. And I feel like Pierce is willing to work with us on this. When I talk to him, he's like, let us know what we can do. And I know there's some stuff we gotta work out. Cindy's gotta work with the banks and stuff on. But the main thing is, if you guys feel comfortable and confident about proceeding with this, we can. But if we put this out to bid and don't use this contract, it's going up 30 grand either way. That's just, they go up 5% every year. And they're not cheap. I can't help that. I don't get to drive them no more, so you don't sit at my house, so I don't benefit from this. But the citizens of Willis, Any Valley, Floyd, sometimes Locust Grove, this truck does have something that's a little unique. And if it works, it should be on every fire truck that we get from now on. And that's the Easy Track front suspension. And what that is basically making it all-wheel drive up to 20 mile an hour without the height.
Right.
If you buy a 4-wheel drive fire truck, the bottom of the wheel well sits about right here.
Yeah.
These are maintaining the same height as the 2-wheel drives, but they'll be able to get in places where we couldn't before.
Right.
That's what Tony was telling me. He said they would be able to access places where they couldn't.
Yeah, and he's done some research. He's actually talked to fire departments in Alaska, if I ain't mistaken.
Yeah.
And, they say it works slick, and that's what we need for around here. And I say it's a great expense. You've got to go into paperwork $45,000 for that.
Yeah.
But if it works,
It could be the difference in somebody's house burning down and not.
I was gonna say, if you've ever fought a structure fire with a brush truck, you'll wish you'd had this.
Right.
I've been there, where it's snow on the ground, big truck won't go up a regular driveway, and you're up there with a brush truck trying to spray 200 gallons of water on fire.
Yeah.
You wish you had four-wheel drive at that
Yeah.
point. So, I mean, I'm glad that they're looking at that, because I think that's something, I mean, as long as I've been involved in it, that's all we need.
The whole height issue has always been why
Yeah.
nobody done it. And this is fairly new,
Yeah.
but if this thing works, like I say, I don't foresee, I know it's a lot of money, but
Well, quite honestly, if it works, and there's a foot of snow on the ground, and there's a structure fire, so every time there's a structure fire anywhere in the county, they're gonna have to tell them out until they know if they can get in the driveway or not.
yeah.
So that, I mean, this truck could be the most used truck in the county for the next 5 years, you know, because there'll be, anytime there's an issue, we're gonna need it.
And this is a work truck, it's not a parade truck. That's
Exactly.
what I like.
Right.
You know, they got rid of all the frills off there.
Yeah. There wasn't a whole lot on here to cut, and, you know, some of the stuff they actually need, like hose reel, but I tried to get this thing down. You know, you can still use a garden hose with an adapter, you don't actually have to have a hose reel, but.
Well, and those four-wheel drives, I'll tell you about, I can't recall when we were talking about $150,000 higher.
Yeah, they're expensive, but you couldn't use them here.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying.
VDOT wouldn't have to clear any trees out ever again.
Yeah, I know, but I was just talking about price.
Three down ridge.
I was just talking about price difference.
Oh, yeah.
It's about 150,000 or better.
Yeah, if it's red, it's gonna be expensive. The same way with law enforcement.
Right.
Anything public safety is ridiculous.
Or
But,
farm.
I know you gotta have it.
yeah. But, what's your guys' thoughts on this?
I think we ought to go ahead with it.
Could you tell me what, 750 gallon capacity and what type of pump? I think that's
1250 pump,
1250 pump and a 750.
750, it's got the phone system with 25 gallon phone system in it. Hold on a second.
I'll probably look right at it and see.
29 foot overall length, 96 inches wide, 9 foot 6 inches overall height. Enforcer chassis, Cummins engine, the small one. I know this sounds crazy, it's small compared to the 600 horse, but it's 450 horsepower, 1250 torque,
Oh,
and Allison transmission, 5-speed.
how many people? How big is the cab?
6,
6.
4 in the rear and 2 in the front.
Wow.
So this essentially be a first front truck, which would then hook a tanker to it, which
Yep.
Willis has the big tanker that can hook to it.
Yeah, and Willis is dealing without a phone system.
Right.
They'll be the last ones to get it, and that makes huge difference.
Oh, yeah, that makes a huge difference. And that's a good system. I mean, that's really the way that I think we need to look at it. You send someone that, your first due in is, he carries manpower, carries a big enough pump to fight the fire. It doesn't need all the water. You put your tanker at the road, hook to it,
Yeah,
because honestly, with, you know, if you had, say, 1,500 gallons of water, you get twice the water, you're gonna have a hard time getting in the driveway. So, you know,
yeah.
that makes sense.
I think they've spec a good
We
truck.
followed out.
And it's comparable to any Valley's first run truck.
Yeah.
They based it off of a spec from Franklin County, and built off of it there. That picture y'all got, it's basically Franklin County's, except they don't have the front axle.
Right.
That's basically what you get in there.
On the average, how many foot of hoses on them trucks?
Oh, you went somewhere, didn't you?
That's gonna vary a lot, truck to truck, and
What size it is, you know, if you got 6-inch hose, you're only gonna be able to fit so much on it compared to 1.5 inches, so it's gonna have plenty of hose on it. I agree with that.
It seemed like they'd pull it forever, and
Most trucks have about 600 foot of supply line, because then you have to start thinking about putting another truck in the middle to help push
water.
push the water.
So your lay on top is your, like, 6-inch line that you're gonna, like in this case, the truck would drop it at the road, go in, leave that on the ground for the tanker to hook to.
Yeah.
And then you've got your crossways that would, most of them have at least 2 crossways that are smaller hose that you actually take in to fight the fire. Did we get one bid, or we get more than one bid on it? Or?
Working off the Houston Galveston bid eliminates that process.
Okay.
It's perfectly legal.
That makes sense.
And that bid runs out in February. So.
Right.
And I bought dispatch equipment that way.
Sure.
They, down there, they just spool everybody together, come out with bids, and it's usually cheaper than what you can push out.
Yeah.
I think we ought to move forward with it.
what say you, Cindy?
I think we need a motion to authorize us to sign the contract.
So move. Second.
Motion is second, your discussion?
Ms. Cookenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Yoder?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Booth?
Yes.
Mr. Thurman?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Let's get the fire truck.
I have one question, if I may, while Kevin's still here. Does the board wish for Justin and I to continue on this committee looking at the equipment, or because we do, we're gonna have to get in it pretty quick. Do you want us to continue on that committee, or?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, I'm just asking the board.
Yeah,
I do want to tell you the rescue squad's asking for an ambulance this year. They're going to try to get a 50-50 grant. But if you're going to have a committee again, you might want to look at their equipment in addition to the fire.
Well, the committee has looked at, you're talking about volunteer?
The volunteers.
Yeah, we looked at the volunteers last year,
Okay.
as well as the paid EMS equipment.
Okay, well, their budget includes a new ambulance.
that committee's been working good, so I think we need to continue it. Y'all willing to do it?
I think we probably need to put that as part of our formal committees that we appoint every
Yeah,
reorganization on it, I would think, wouldn't it?
We never have.
I think that would be a good idea.
'Cause I think that, either you do it that way, or you actually have the chair appoint one, too.
Didn't we
Yeah.
used to have that on the agenda first of January, and
Not since I've been here.
I think we did at one point, but I don't know. And it may have been one of those appointments that didn't have an end date on it.
it works pretty good too.
Yeah. I suggest the chair appoint. That would be my suggestion.
I done did.
Well, I was just, if we were gonna get into it, I just wanna make sure we're doing what the board wanted.
You're willing to serve, right?
Okay. Unless someone says a partner desire.
I think it's good for the board and the departments. The departments show the county how well they take care of stuff, and it helps the board show that they care.
Yep.
And they can talk to them. So it's a good win-win either way.
It
Absolutely.
makes it easier when you know they're taking care of it.
Well, I can tell you for me, it was, and that was the first time doing it, it was a learning experience for me. It helped me understand what we are sitting here doing right now.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's one thing
Yeah.
it's one thing to sit here and you got the paperwork in front of you, all right, I can actually visualize.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Well, actually, there's been some improvements made by them since we've had this,
It's actually worked really well. I remember when we first discussed it, there was a lot of pushback because people thought, oh, you're just trying to get in their business. But I think it's been a positive. I think what Mr. Booth said, it's given us a chance to learn. It's given them a chance to present, cured a few problems along the way. And, yeah, I think it's been a really positive, really positive thing.
Well, we also get to look at the buildings and
That's
see
right.
what's, coming up on them too.
They've got you cornered for however long, so you know, you can hear about it first.
I don't know, we did pretty good last year.
Yeah.
We had to get down the other end, got a little hung up, but we had more than one door down there, so.
Well, I appreciate y'all's time this evening.
Thank you.
I'll speak with, Mr. Barber before we leave, and,
Yeah.
y'all have a good night.
You too, thank you,
All right.
Thank you.
thank you,
Thank you, man.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
thank you, safe drive home.
Thank you.
Maybe next time.
I went out there and checked down the, one station 3, that was pretty.
See, we're gonna break Jerry's bank account. I guess we can continue with Cindy's report, James.
Okay, 10C. Last meeting, we talked about, Mark Bolt had come before you and asked for permission to, go out to bid for re-roof of the maintenance building. And he also said there was a need for new lighting over at the maintenance building. And at the time, you had approved the re-roof, but you said the lighting could wait till after the roof project. Mr. Bolt feels like, he needs to really proceed with the lighting now. He says the roof really doesn't affect it because where the lighting would be placed is not under any of the leaks. So if it's okay with you, if you authorize us, we'll go out to bid for the lighting project.
You need a motion to
Yeah.
that?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second, any other discussion? All right,
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Cookenbook?
Yes.
Mr. Yoder?
Yes.
Mr. Booth?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
yes,
Motion approved.
I take Mark's recommendation on 10.
Well, the only question I had about it to begin with was the lighting, was where the roof leaks were. I didn't really know at that time, but after looking at it, as long as, you know, I don't want to put new lights up and have them blow.
Yeah, by the time we voted on it, he had someplace to go, and he had left the meeting, so he couldn't answer that question, but he said he didn't think the one had anything to do with the other. Okay, next part of the thing is the big discussion about trying to finance all of this.
Thank you, Jerry, you're a big thank you. We did win that $1 billion.
No, they let $1 short, you gotta buy a ticket to win.
What we need to discuss, we're having a bid opening this Friday for the garbage truck. And at that point, we'll know how much the low bid on that is. We already have the ambulance being built. And we now have, tomorrow, we'll have a contract on the pumper. So by the end of this week, we should have pretty firm prices on those 3 things. In addition, there's the radio system financing and how much we might want to ask Davenport to search for that. And then there's the other part of the shell building financing. So do we want to ask Davenport to put something together for us, to roll all of this together?
We even started budget.
And if so, for how many years? And do we want to finance the whole thing, or do we want to dip down into our unreserved for part of it? Those are some other questions to ask. And we could ask Davenport to come up with different proposals.
I like that.
Me too.
Yep.
I'd like to see some proposals from Davenport on the,
Or some advice on how.
Yeah, they've always been pretty forward and
Oh, yeah.
various scenarios and how, I like that approach.
Once you know the final number, I mean,
Yeah. with your permission, I'd like to wait till Friday, get that garbage truck. I email them and tell them, give my heads up that we're coming with something.
Right.
And that we would like a couple of different alternatives on how to do it. I'm gonna roughly say maybe we're looking at roughly $8 million, possibly.
4 million for the radio, 3.9, just round that up to 4.
I rounded up higher because we're talking about land acquisition and
Probably,
their cost.
4.5? Yeah, I would think. I was thinking 5, not to exceed, but, just.
Yeah, 4.5, that would give you a little bit of a contingency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're saying possibly up to 8 million financing. We want a couple of different alternatives.
On
Okay.
equipment like that, we really can't go much over 10 years. Like garbage trucks, fire trucks, we
See, that's why I was wondering about combining them. We may have to have two separate.
They'll
know. Yeah, they'll know.
There are some variations.
That depreciation.
Like radio system, but I don't know, the radio system, you may only look at it as a 10-year system.
Well, we got, 93 to, I mean.
I don't want to go through that.
Yeah, but digital,
Well, digital's gonna have to be upgraded more.
yeah, but I think digital upgrades are gonna be different than analog upgrades. I believe that they won't,
It won't be cheap.
it won't be cheap, but it's also not, it's gonna be different. It won't be cheap, but it won't be an entire,
Right, it's gonna be less work.
less
more
work,
expense.
but more expensive, yeah.
They're gonna bring a laptop plug in instead of.
And still sensible.
Yeah, right.
If you just go to the garage. And
So we're
put the
looking at,
computer on,
say that again,
that's
so we're looking at the
what it's-
radios.
This is bad.
Radios, the Shell building, the other part of the financing on the Shell
Right,
building.
fire
Garbage truck, fire truck, and ambulance.
Do you, of course, I know our community, does it look like we're gonna be able to make it without doing that additional box this year on the ambulance?
I mean, we've already ordered two. We've ordered one out of the CARES money, and we ordered the other one. We're paying part of it, and we've got a grant for the other part.
I think we're good on it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Because remember, Phil mentioned that we may have to do a box replacement this year. But by doing the two ambulances, that may eliminate that.
He was talking to me the other day when we were talking about his budget for next year, and he was saying, I said, what's gonna happen to the ones that are gonna be replaced because we're getting these two this year? And he was talking about possibly next year putting a new box on one and making it, spare backup or something.
So that'd be in next year.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is what we were hoping for.
Right.
Okay. I just want to make
Did
sure
we
I
have
had it.
money budgeted for the ambulance?
What we had budgeted was the debt service payment on a loan for the
Financing.
garbage, fire, and ambulance.
Right.
It was just the debt service. The
Right.
good news about all this is we have waited so long to get
The
this
interest
together.
rates.
Well, not only the interest rates, we won't have a debt service payment fiscal year 21. It won't be until 22 that we'll have our debt service payment.
Yeah, by the time all the paperwork, everything's processed, it'll be after July 1, so.
That's like, when you get a mortgage, you get that 3 months.
So it's helped
I don't
us
know,
for this
3
year.
years.
I do.
That's good, I can remember that budget work session, we kept trying to figure out what all was in that payment.
Right.
Now I'm like. I distinctly remember all that.
The nice thing about it is, some of this is already built into our budget.
Yeah.
So going into next year, there will be some additional costs, but if we go with level funding, a lot of this is already built into a level funded budget. Not all of it, but some of it.
I'm thinking.
Well, I
hate
would
to
say the
it.
garbage, fire, and ambulance is
That's
built
right.
in, but certainly not the radio
That's
system.
right.
Yeah.
But there's a
That's
portion.
a portion.
There's a portion.
I wouldn't say a lot, but a
Well,
portion.
We'll have to wait and see what that for.
It's got some zeros behind it.
I think we're looking at about 2 cents. with what we've already got in the budget.
Cutting 2 cents out of the budget.
I'm projecting about 2 cents, about a penny and a half to a penny and 3/4.
Dropping our pencils.
Anyway.
So I think that I have consensus to ask Adam for a couple of different scenarios, and we're talking about up to 8 million, but we'll have a little bit better number on Monday.
Right, and it may be less than that.
Okay.
Tell them to burn your midnight oil.
Yeah, whatever they come up with.
Any oxygen they want to.
Okay.
So we like to hear their
We're already on the hook for Indian Valley. So tell them we got 3 more if they need.
Speak to that. There's 2 in your district, now where the 3rd one is. No, and I haven't volunteered yet.
I don't have school.
You might have to redistrict.
You could have 2.
Okay, we'll get in touch with you here.
The next item is a discussion of a vaccine center, 1 day a week in Floyd. As you know, we were looking at the library as a possible site, and Kamala Bauer at Floyd Echoes Village very kindly offered to use the Floyd Echo Center as a possible site. The 2 representatives from the New River Valley Task Force came and looked at both the library and the Echo Center. Had some concerns about the parking situation at the library and also the traffic flow there. And they were going to have to use more room in the building than the facility that had originally been offered to them. But when they got out to the Floyd Echo Center and saw the parking, the road in, the facility itself, they said this is ideal. And so Ms. Bauer has very graciously, not only did she offer us the use of it, but it will not be at any cost to the county. We can set it up once and leave it set up for the entire duration, and we know that this could take several weeks to do. If they come out 1 day a week for over several week period, we can just leave it set up the whole time. She did ask that we handle the road scraping if there's snow, and that we handle the COVID cleanup. We'll do a light cleanup after the event, so that
That's a gimme,
a
yeah.
big COVID cleanup at the end of the whole thing.
I just want to say that I was so floored. I got the email and sent it on to Cindy, and Cindy's work has been extraordinary, trying to make sure that this happens for our citizens, to get a site for vaccinations here. And I just think it's just an example of citizens working with county government to help all citizens here. And I just think it's just a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy.
And Kevin.
And Kevin, yeah.
Kevin is going to a New River Joint Task Force meeting on Friday where they said they will be providing more information about how to get vaccine centers in the localities. So hopefully we'll have some more information after his meeting on Friday, but we're really working toward that goal.
Such good news.
One other thing I wanted to tell you about, and I think I may have mentioned it before, the library has really stepped up. They have, one of our big concerns is that a lot of citizens in Floyd County don't have internet access, and the preferred way to register for a vaccine is through the internet. They have agreed that if any citizen, Floyd County citizen who is in the 1B group who does not have internet wants to get on the list to get an appointment, they can call the library, and the manager and assistant manager, the branch manager and assistant branch manager, while the person's on the phone, will take the information from them and sign them into the internet at that time. They're not actually registering for an appointment. What they're doing is providing their information for New River Valley Health District to get back to them to set up the appointment, but at least they're into the system to get an appointment.
Right.
So that's,
So wonderful.
yeah,
And
and,
this site over there, is that the one where you gotta them the form to, get,
Right now, as far as we know, even here in Floyd, you have to sign up with the New River to get an appointment. It's not just going to be a walk-in thing. That is our understanding right now. Things are really fluid.
It's really, what they got set up there is really nice. I took my wife's grandmother over today, and I signed her up several weeks ago, and then they contacted me. She didn't have an email address, and she's 87, 86. So, anyway, I handled it for her, and then drove her over and got her vaccine. It was, we had an appointment for 12:15, so we got there at 12. She had her vaccine and we were sitting down. They wanted to stay there 15 minutes, make sure she didn't have a reaction. And we had got there at noon, had the vaccine, and were sitting down waiting at 12:12, so 3 minutes before her actual appointment. It was so quick, and she said that she didn't even realize they were giving her the vaccine. It didn't hurt her. She was happy to see them. She was happy. She hadn't had any side effects. But it was really just a good, they had it really worked out well, where you came in, you filled out the paperwork, they had a through a line where
Stations.
kind of stations, it really went really well.
When they came and looked at the Echo Center, they were talking how they would set the stations up.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the way they had thought through and kind of kept people separated the whole time where you weren't, in a line over top, walking over top of other people all the time. I was really impressed.
A couple of other people I want to recognize as really helping out is Sheriff Craig is having his dispatchers, when they do their Rise and Shine calls in the morning, are letting them know about the New River Valley Road to Wellness website and encouraging them to register, and if they don't have internet, to contact the library. And Chad Alls is having his benefit specialist do the same thing with those people that they have come in contact with. So we're trying to get the message out there in as many ways as we can to people that there are many ways to try to get registered.
One of the things I noticed over there today is it looked like, this is just from observation, but it looked like maybe there had been a lot of employees coming in from Hubble. And I know one of the things they asked us when we walked in is, where are you from? Do you have an appointment out? It may have been that they had picked one. It always seemed like they had picked one manufacturer that anyone from that company could come that day in addition to the people with the, which kind of led me to start thinking about, well, we've got a couple here. I don't know how they work that, but I know the schools have already had opportunities, but maybe some of a couple larger employers might.
There are some defense contractors I know in the Montgomery County area that are, that took that, and I would assume that H&V has been contacted, but I don't
I just
know.
something I thought about. You probably know more about it than I do.
Yeah.
I can tell you that manufacturing is in the 1B group.
Right.
At the same time, local government was all set up to get ours. H&V was also set up to get theirs, and unfortunately they got bumped out just at the same time we did. So,
Okay.
hopefully they get theirs scheduled in.
Have you made any progress on a site to hand out tests? Is that still in the works?
That's still in the works, that's my fault.
No,
It really is.
No, Lord.
James Pritchett.
As much as you've been doing, I was just wondering, as much as you've been doing, no. I was just wanting to make sure it was still in the works.
James Pritchett has agreed to River Valley Community Services being the place for a self-test kit site.
Okay.
He can provide one staff person and one computer 3 days a week. Giles County's already doing this, and talking to their county administrator, he said it takes about 2 people to do it. And what happens, people drive up, he says the most they've seen in any one day is 20 people. And he says they drive up, one of the people helps with the parking and kind of gives them an overview of what's to happen. Then they drive through the site, and the other one's the coach. And the coach gives the person the kit. The person does their own nasal swab, puts it inside one bag and then puts the one bag inside of another bag, hands it to the coach who puts it in a cooler, and then you have to arrange transportation of the test to the Blacksburg site where it's, with the lab where it's analyzed. I still have to arrange another person, and I have to arrange transportation of the test.
I talked to them, you know, the ones we had talked about, I don't want to name names without them being contacted, but I think that, depending on what they're doing, if they're not doing their normal stuff, they might be willing.
Okay, I will reach out to them.
Do we know if there's a shortage of available test
From
requirements?
what I'm understanding, I think they have plenty of self-test kits.
Well, maybe I phrased that wrong. Is it hard for someone to go get a test right now?
Depends, if you just want to test, I don't think so. If you want a rapid test, I think that's the problem.
Okay.
Today I was on one of the manager meeting calls, and Chris McCarney from Giles County says these self-test kits that, usually it takes 2 days. He said the past week they have had so few people doing them that they do the, test in the morning, take it over to Blacksburg, and they get the results in the evening.
Wow.
But as more people start doing it.
But as more people
it's
start
just like
doing
the
it,
other.
yes.
I guess the reason I ask is, you know, I've had acquaintances that have wanted to get tested and they just went to, there's a number of places they could go pretty easily and get a test, you know, so I was curious if that's a big need or if, I mean, I can see the vaccine side, that's a huge need, so I don't want us to, I don't want you to lose energy off of one.
Well, I'm focusing my energy towards the vaccines. The test, people can get them, we just thought having it here in Floyd would be more convenient
Yes.
for people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I've had a couple, I refrain using the term elderly because I fall into the category myself,
They
but.
say, watch it.
But I've had several inquiries if we were going to, you know, set up something, if we could get something set up here. Because it is hard for a lot of our citizens. They can make it to town and back home, all right, but as far as Traverse and all that, Christiansburg and Blacksburg.
Yeah.
I've had some like that. So when would they start giving the vaccine up here?
That's what we're hoping that Kevin learns on Friday.
$million question,
Yeah.
That's Dr. Bissell's with the health department's call.
And would they sign up the same way online?
Yeah.
Right now, that's our understanding, but like I said, this is so fluid. We hear one thing one day, and by the end of the week, it's something different.
Again, just kudos to all the staff working on it, seriously. So important.
I said it before, but I mean, that's the most important thing we can do right now. It's more important than our budget or anything, is having that availability to, just talking to my wife's grandmother this morning, you know, she's basically lived by herself for 9 months we went over and sat on the porch and talked to her through the window, but, you know, just, it's hard on people, you know, mentally, physically, and emotionally.
Some friends of ours, of course, I won't say where they live, but he was 95, she's 90, and then 2 of her daughters have been staying with him, and all 4 of them got it. And so the 90-year-old wife ended up in the hospital. They sent her to Forsyth yesterday, or Sunday, and then she passed away yesterday. But he's 95, tested positive, but asymptomatic. Then one of the daughters is in the hospital. She come home, they had to send her back, you know, so, you know, it's really hurting the elderly population.
It is, and it's affecting people.
We have fun on this.
Yeah.
You can do it, it's true.
It's coming.
I was calling the white-haired center section.
There you go. You got thrown in at that time. Just sitting there, just sitting there. I see some more back out this way too. But it's, It's very serious, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people not taking it serious even now. And there's not much you can do.
Like the mayor's, in Washington State, if somebody gets in your face, pepper spray, that's what you know.
Yeah, and they pay for that more ways than
You
one.
got that right. He's the mayor, so. We had something else on,
I have one thing under old and new business. And that was, at a previous meeting, we were discussing the, how many PSA connections had been prepaid and needing to document how many we had and how many had been used. So, we got this from the PSA, and if you're comfortable with it, if you'd, authorize me to sign this, and then we will continue signing them as we use them in the future.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that to authorize, Ms. Ryan to, sign these, as they come up.
Second.
And then any county administrator,
Well, I would just say authorize me to sign it for the Floyd Growth Center.
right, for the growth center.
And then next time that one's going to
Whoever.
use.
Right, would be, we do it, right. Yep. Thank you.
That was what your motion was.
Yeah,
That's what I seconded.
seconded.
That's right.
motion second, we,
Mr. Yoder?
Yes.
Ms. Cookenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Booth?
Yes.
Mr. Sherman?
yes.
Motion passes.
Oh, anybody got anything else?
I do,
Oh, Lord.
and it's a Tuesday.
Oh, boy.
But I'm just asking you to think about it.
You got too much to think about already?
Well,
Good.
what I'm gonna ask is, does involve a tax increase. We have the funds, and it's my understanding the funds do qualify. You pull the sheet out right here. You follow that second one from the bottom up. You have $460,000 plus sitting right there. I'm asking you to consider us using that to build the structure, office and storage area in the rec park, thereby opening up across the street, the basement across the street, for potential use by another agency. The last number, and I guess you may want to double check with Mark. The last number that I heard was 265,000.
Well, Mark and I looked at that the other day, and he and I both remembered it being 160.
Okay, that's
That's
even
what I
better.
was thinking.
That's even better. I was told 260, but that's all right. And the reason for that is, I know another agency's been authorized to hire 2 more people. I think they're planning to go ahead and hire 1, but they're gonna split an existing office, which is basically gonna be,
But that money is not in a separate fund.
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's in a separate fund, but that money is budgeted every year though, isn't it, into the budget?
I'm glad you asked that question. The way we budget, we always have our revenues match our expenditures. And when we budget money in the meals tax, we're assuming that we're going to use that money that we're going to earn out of that to pay capital expenditures that year.
Correct.
But we have never touched it.
I've never done it.
We've never done it.
We
But we build our budget in such a way that it's assuming that we're using so much in this collection to meet our expenditures for that year, which really puts us in a bad position, because that's really starting us off as though we're, gonna be spending more than we're.
We're essentially spending down our fund balance to,
We're not, we're assuming we're gonna spend our fund balance, but we're never actually appropriating it, spending it. For example, these things.
That's why that number is as big as it is.
That's why it's as big as it is. We have never appropriated that money to be used to pay for any of the capital things we've done, even though our budgets are set up assuming we're gonna use what we budgeted that year.
but that is still included in our fund balance at the end of the year, right? That fund is,
That fund is, yes,
right.
The capital fund.
the meals tax.
Meals tax fund, right.
It is included in our fund balance.
So if we spend that down, we're essentially spending our fund balance now.
That's part of our fund now.
Right, ideally, what we would do is change the way we appropriate and budget.
I mean,
Maybe,
what I would recommend is either we don't budget any revenue if we don't plan to spend it that year,
Right.
or if we do plan to budget to receive, we also have a budget of what capital project we're going to be using it for.
so if you were,
Yeah,
so you're asking to build something, we can also buy something that would
As long as it's a one-time expenditure.
right.
I would never want to see us using the meals tax for debt service
right.
on the capital.
Well, we could have turned around and used it for the ambulance.
Yeah.
Or one of the things this evening, we could have.
Yeah, we could have.
That's my question, is I would be interested, I'm open very much to what you're proposing, I just wonder if Davenport would maybe say, hey, maybe better to do this and this.
I think that ought to be one of the alternatives.
Absolutely.
And look at it with it, but I'm just asking you to consider it, because I know the space problem is going to become a big problem before long.
We've been lucky if the state hasn't come in and told us that we want to have to find another place.
You know, just how creative Mr. Rose has always been, he may say, hey, take this and do that, and then finance this, and in 3 years, it's gonna do this.
That's what I think's gonna
And
happen.
it may be better to finance that building down there versus paying for it. I'm just saying, right now, there's a pocket of money there that would qualify.
I mean, I think it's our due diligence to use everything at our resources, and it's staying within healthy means to make sure we're getting the best.
Well, that was the promise to the people of what it would be used for. Y'all three were, y'all were on board when this passed. That was the promise that it would be used for capital project, capital expenditures.
That was the way to vote on it, it has to be used.
Yeah, it has to
I mean,
be.
we would be doing something
Referendum.
illegal if we do something else.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to follow how we budget, so
Yeah,
We
this is
show it
going
coming
to
in,
be
we
live,
all
I mean,
do.
We
how
don't
do you,
show it going out.
It just stays there, which gives us an offset.
so essentially, we're spending that much less out of the budget every year.
We're spending it, but we're
Pulling-
not
pulling
using the
over.
revenue stream that we had planned to
We're using a
use.
different revenue stream.
Yeah,
and we have to sort of have a list of what we're using it on, since it was, that's kind of how we got it passed.
oh, absolutely. And we have never used it.
We just have a capped off well that we say we're using, but we never do.
But we haven't said, yeah, I want to use the meals tax for this.
Right.
And then
That's
when we
what I'm-
say that,
that's what I'm asking.
that's
That's-
right.
The first year, I remember a spreadsheet saying this is all the items that we,
Could have.
We could have, we had every year during the budget, this is the capital things, but we've never appropriated the money
Well, the
out
first,
of the meals
out of
tax
that
to pay.
specific fund.
the
Correct.
first year was only like 75,000, there wasn't much we could do.
Right.
I mean, there's,
Right, but, so essentially what we've done is we've shifted our fund balance has stayed fairly even over the last couple of years, and we've essentially shifted some money from one to the other
Yeah.
category
By not spending,
by not spending it.
by not spending it.
can it be in its own?
I mean, you don't want, I mean,
I can tell you from my discussions on the fire and rescue fund, it's, on paper, it's separate, but the money in the bank's in one.
Understood.
Right. Yeah,
But we have to show what we're spending this on, we owe that to our
oh,
citizens.
absolutely.
Oh, I mean,
Well, I'm giving you something, right?
I understand, and I think this is great that you brought this up for discussion.
But I think we could buy, yeah,
I think we just need to look at it and get Davenport, add that to Davenport's and explain what I've brought up.
Okay.
And look, if that's all right with y'all, see which way it's better. Is it better to spend that on part of the trash truck and borrow money for down there, or?
But if we do that, our fund balance goes down and we start getting into the negative, we're going backwards on fund balance.
Correct, because it's part of the whole.
Which then puts us in a worse position to borrow
Well,
money,
let's
potentially.
see what that,
Yeah.
I agree, I think we ought to say, let's give them both alternatives.
Sure.
So show us what it looks like if we use it versus if
I'm
we.
so reluctant to spend fund balance because we finally gotten to the point that our auditors say, all right, we're right here where we need to be, and I don't want.
but 460,000 of it is from the meals tax.
That's supposed to be spent on capital projects.
Right. That needs to change the way we do it.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
I'm just looking at a potential, taking care of a potential problem. We had it in the budget, then we took it out when we weren't sure about COVID, but we weren't designated out of this fund. We were talking about basically borrowing money to do it.
And you're gonna find that auditors and finance people look at it very differently.
Yeah, I get
Well,
that.
just food for thought, that's all.
Should we roll, I mean, we could almost say that 160, if it, I'm gonna confirm that that's 160, be part of that 8 million, because if once we get the final real numbers, I think it might fit in there. And just say, and these are the two different ways
And
we're
then
gonna look at it.
Then you're gonna have some renovation cost
Right.
over here.
The 460 is, that's a big chunk out of fund balance.
Yeah, but we're
And maybe
we're obligated to spend that.
But
You're obligated to spend it on capital items, but
Correct.
that could be spent over 5 years.
Absolutely.
While saving general fund, money back to
Absolutely,
capital fund.
absolutely, yeah, I'm
So
not
to
saying we
balance
have,
it out.
yeah,
Right,
yeah,
I see
yeah.
what you're saying.
Well, do you want to offer Davenport an upper limit of how much of that you'd be comfortable using?
I don't feel comfortable making that determination. I think they are well enough to make personally. You know, I say this is what we have, this is what we have here,
This is what this was supposed to be spent for.
personally. This is our
So
intention.
if we had spent it as it came in, we would still be at the same fund balance number.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Right.
it's a paperwork issue, it's not
Right.
necessarily a fund balance issue.
It is, yeah.
It's just like for years, I wanted to put that fire and rescue money, especially when we had a lot in it, in a separate fund. Because see, that was part of what got spent way back in between 96 and 2002 was fire and rescue fund. It was all in one fund. On paper, it was still being kept separate. But the actual money in the bank was gone.
Wait a minute. Let me check something with Scott Wickham tomorrow. Because
Okay.
the more I'm thinking about it, is the meals tax part of the unrestricted or is it part of the restricted? It might be part of the restricted
Restricted
since
money.
we say it can only be used for certain things.
I think so.
And that's where
And if that's the case, then it is,
It's not,
the more I'm thinking about it, the more I think it's part of the
Restricted
restricted.
monies and not
I don't know why we were
to.
doing it that way, I thought it was just part of the appropriate, I thought when we appropriated, we were appropriating that fund.
It's never, that's why it's built up to where it's at. It's never been
I can't believe
appropriated.
it's built up that quick.
It has seemed like it's.
When did y'all when did that pass?
Oh, before your time.
Yeah, I know.
So,
It was right before your time.
yeah, so.
It was the first, one of the first things
That
that
was
we
the
did.
same election issue, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Well,
was.
okay, well, then it's 3 years
Yeah,
worth.
3 years, that's incredible.
Yeah, I think it was the same issue.
I think it was either that or the one before.
Let me check with Scott. I think it's restricted.
Maybe, no, that's a good.
It makes sense.
Then it wouldn't affect the numbers.
It's crazy that there's that much revenue this year too.
And that may be the reason that we leveled off on the, because I keep looking at those numbers where we just have leveled off on the
Yeah.
fund balance, and my big fear is that as much money as the feds are pumping into the economy, the inflation's gonna hit.
Yeah.
And then they're gonna say, well, you had 7 million in unrestricted, now you need 9 million because of inflation, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's.
Well, and used to, you wanted your debt service, you wanted your debt service no more than 10% of, 10% of your budgeted amount, or I forget now what all that was, but anyway, Terry looked into it before she left and talked with them, and it's now 17%.
Right.
So, which
Which
we're
is still
no,
not that much.
which is not that much, and we're not at 17% either, so.
No, we need to keep growing. That's a really good point, so the other thing about restricted.
Yep.
So that's,
Anyway, food for thought, and let that report do their thing. I just think it would solve some problems if we could. And if it works out better doing something else, that's fine. I'm not,
So when we get all the numbers, if we can put that 160 and still have it under 8 million, do you wanna put that one in there too?
If we're borrowing money, we might as well do it all.
Yeah.
I would think so myself.
And quite frankly, a building is gonna be a better long-term investment than some of the other things about it. Trash truck.
We're gonna have to do something for that.
Oh, yeah, services is busted, so there's no reason to think it's gonna.
There may be some state help on the
Well, you get a
renovation.
little bit more for your,
Right.
square footage.
Can't. That's being looked into. That's all I had.
New administration building.
do you think we'll have
Well,
something?
that's on the agenda sometime, but right now, no, but
In 2050, I'm gonna deal with it.
2050.
You think we'll have some of this by our next meeting, Jamie, as far as having this conversation on federal and all these hard numbers and things of that nature?
Well, we'll definitely the garbage truck, I'm gonna email Scott, first thing in the morning, and then I'm gonna email David and ask him if it's possible that he could be our next day meeting.
I feel like,
4 years.
personally, I would like to have some information before we go into the work session. For sure.
That'll be a big number.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I don't want to put any, hard work on people that is just curious. I think that would really help, because then we're looking at the end of February, and if not, so starting to get crunch time when we started.
Well, there's so many other things with COVID, there's so many other things that kind of have more short staffs, so. Trying to get, it's a huge load for you, I'm sorry. I wish I was smart enough to come help.
You got anything else?
Yeah, well,
Go ahead.
that's a form of motion.
Yeah. I can tell you, a motion to adjourn supersedes any other motion, so once it's made, you have to take action on it.
I'll take a motion that we adjourn till February the 9th at 8:30 a.m.
Second.
I did just.
You did.